Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. Abu Huraira quoted Allah's Messenger as saying, 7 will be shaded by Allah Almighty on a day when there will be no other shade besides His shade. A just ruler, a youth who grows up worshipping Allah, a man whose heart is attached to the mosques, 2 men who love each other for the sake of Allah. They meet on the basis of it, and they separate on the basis of it. A man who is invited by a woman of high position and beauty, and he replies, "Indeed, I fear Allah." A man who gives charity and hides it so much that his left hand is unaware of what his right hand gave. And a man who remembers Allah in private, and his eyes become filled with tears. We looked in our previous segment at the significance of the number 7, and we said it was not that significant because there are other narrations in which 7 is included, as with other descriptions of others who are not included in this 7, but other characteristics or other individuals who would be in the shade of Allah's throne. We also pointed out that these characteristics are not limited to males, though male terminology is used. And we also looked at the concept of Allah's throne, and that we accept that Allah has a throne as He describes, but we don't go into how that throne is, beyond what has been described to us. Now we will look at the first of the 7 categories mentioned in this particular narration. And that is the just Imam, Imamun Adil. And we said that the justice of this Imam, this particular character, this individual, has to be based on the fear of Allah. That he is not just externally in appearance, but internally he is unjust. Because it means that he is only deceiving people. What they think to be justice, in fact, is not. He is just because he wants to win over their hearts, and later, when they have submitted themselves to him, then he will become unjust. Or he is just because of other factors which are material-based, other factors within the society, because those around him, for example, who are also powerful and, are sharing some of his power or whatever, they cause him or force him to be just. Because that kind of justice will go. Where it is not based on the love and the fear of Allah, it means that it will be temporary. As long as certain pressures are there, the person will be just. And when the pressures are not there, they will be unjust. It is awareness of the Day of Judgment that one will be held accountable, for which one then becomes afraid, that causes a person to be just all the time, regardless of the circumstances. Whether there is benefit or harm, he is just. As Allah tells us in the Quran, to be just even if it is against ourselves, against our families. We should not allow enmity between ourselves and others to cause us to be unjust. So, this characteristic of justice, true justice, is one which is based on the fear of Allah and the love of Allah, a desire to fulfill Allah's commandment. And this justice, as we said, is both external and internal. Externally, the just ruler applies the laws across the board. He does not apply it to the weak members of the society and excuse the stronger, richer, more powerful elements. In other words, you have an element of society who are, as they say, above the law. No, no one is above the law. So his justice is for everybody, each and every member of the society. And this was demonstrated by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the occasion when a woman from the Makhzum tribe had stolen some property, and her hand was to be cut off. This was in Medina. And the people from the tribe, because they were a powerful tribe, they approached Usama ibn Zayd, who they knew was very close to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet loved him ﷺ extremely. He was the son of his former adopted son. So they approached him and asked him to intercede on behalf of this woman. When he did so, the Prophet ﷺ was extremely angry. And he gathered the people together and told them that the destruction of those who came before you was a result of them applying the law to the weak and excusing the powerful. This element, when this element is in society, it destroys societies. So beware of it. When you apply the law, it should be across the board. So the Prophet ﷺ, in order to emphasize this point, he went on to say, even if my own daughter, Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even if she stole, I would cut off her hand. This is his commitment to justice. Even if it is within his own family, he would not make any exceptions. And this is the example of the just ruler. He does not excuse anybody from the justice. His family are not above the law. Unfortunately, in our societies today, the tendency is for those who are close to the ruler to be excused. They have access to things that the rest of the society doesn't. Whereas the law should be across the board if it is truly for the sake of Allah. And as we said, that is the external appearance of the law. And it should also be internal, that ruler is just within himself. Out of his fear of Allah, his love of Allah, within himself, he is just. He is not doing it just to create an impression of justice, but he is doing it sincerely out of fear and love of Allah. His establishment of justice removes oppression from the land. And this is among the descriptions which were given by the Prophet ﷺ to the righteous who would come, like the Mahdi, who would be among the signs of the last day, and Isa alayhi salam, who would return as among the signs of the last day, the major signs. They are both described as filling the earth with justice where there was oppression and corruption. They would replace it during their rule with justice. We can also see that with this just Imam, then the Sharia, the law of Allah, would then be applied in the land, and it would benefit the society as a whole. Because all of the other requirements of Islam would then become so much easier to do. If the Imam is just, and he is applying Allah's Sharia across the board, then all aspects of the society, its economic, its social, etc. functions, would aid the individual citizens in implementing Islam. So, in that just realm of the just ruler, the laws governing economics, prohibiting interest from society would be there. So people would not have to be struggling about, should I put my money in a bank which involves interest or not? This would not be in front of them. They would be spared all of those trials. Similarly, times for prayer. When the time for prayer comes, stores would be closed. Stores of Muslims would be closed. And people would be required to go to the masjid. Of course, how it takes place may not necessarily be in the form that we can find it in some countries, where those who are involved in encouraging it, maybe doing it a bit roughly, using sticks and chasing people to the mosques, etc. No, we don't need to go to that extreme, but it would be applied, and it would make the issue of salah and going to the prayers much easier for people, and so on and so forth. Now, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ further described those who are just as having particular places with Allah on the Day of Judgment. After benefiting from the shade of the throne, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, he quoted the Prophet ﷺ as saying, "The just ones will be on podiums of light on the right hand of Ar-Rahman, Allah, the most merciful, and both of his hands are right. Those who are just in their rulings and their families and in what they have been put in authority over. These are the just ones." Allah puts them in that special position of honor because of their justice. And as we mentioned earlier, that the imam, though this imamate is restricted to the males of the society, women still function as imams within their families. In the absence of their husband, they are in charge of the family, in charge of the children, and the elements within the home, if they're servants, etc. They are now required to be just. In dealing with the children, they should not favor some over others, giving presents to some and not to others, being kind and loving to some and not others. This is not permissible. They should treat them all fairly and justly. The Prophet ﷺ, in another narration quoted by Abu Huraira, also said that there are three people whose du'as would not be rejected by Allah. One who remembers Allah often, the oppressed, and the just imam. One who remembers Allah often, the oppressed, and the just imam. Most of us know about the oppressed, that the dua of the oppressed is answered. But it's not so well known that the just imam's dua are also answered. So they have been put in a special category because of the gravity of the responsibility which is placed on them. However, on the other hand, there are severe punishments for those who are unjust. The hatred of Allah comes upon them, as the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith narrated by Abu Huraira, that there are four people whom Allah is angry with. And by saying these four, of course Allah is angry with all who are evil, who are unjust, who are whatever in general. But when the Prophet ﷺ takes out four from all of these, who Allah is in general angry with, and says Allah is angry with these four people, it means there's a particular anger, that He is more angry with them than others. And the four He mentions were: one, the trader who frequently swears by Allah. He uses Allah's name to sell his products, meaning he is just using it to convince people, when in fact what he's selling is not necessarily what he claims. The second is the proud pauper, one who is proud in spite of his lowly status in the society, but he's still driven by pride. We're not referring to one who is humble, who is shy to go and beg, but one who is proud of himself as an individual, maybe claiming for himself certain status. Thirdly, the adulterous old man, the man who he really has no desires. He's an older man, but he's still falling into adultery. Such a person Allah is particularly angry with. And the last category is the sinful imam, one who Allah has given all of this power and position, and he abuses that power. Allah is particularly angry with such an individual. So the first of the categories of those who will be under the shade of Allah's throne is the just imam. We'll continue to look at the other categories in our coming episodes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.